So I've got myself a couple of LEDs, different colours here, and we'll test them with the LED tester in a minute. I've got this strip here. This is from DCC Concepts, and it's excellent. I don't know if Richard still stocks these anymore. I have a bunch of them left over, but basically that's a thin printed circuit board, and up the end here is spacing to put a resistor, and then anywhere along here you can put in your LED just by poking it in like that, and then soldering on the other side, snip off those leads, which I'll do, and snip this board to shape, put the length in that you want, and mount that up inside the roof of your particular wagon, and we'll mount it up in there. Fit a couple of 2 wires to it, and that's how we'll mount that on the roof. So nice and easy. We'll have a play with that. This is a flicker-free, another DCC Concepts. Well, it's actually an older product now, and once again, I'm not sure if Richard's still stocking them. I've got a bundle of them. Basically, the 2 black wires come from your DCC or DC track voltage, and you've got a capacitor here that stores a charge. In this case, this is a 0.33 farad, which is fairly high capacitance for such a small package. And there is an output here for DC of red and black being your positive and negative for your LEDs. This is basically a voltage regulator and bridge rectifier circuit and a diode and so on. Nothing much to it, and that's what we're going to use inside the wagon, and you won't see that once that's up inside there. And the flicker free stores a bit of charge, so if this goes along the track, hits a spot where there's a little bit of conductivity issue, the lights won't flicker on it. So we're going to put some lights inside the wagon, and then these little beauties here we'll put on the outside. So just to give you an idea, this is one of the Loco lamp series. Very difficult for me to actually show you this, but this is a red and white light on either one. So it's an LED back to back, and one side's got a red light, one side's got a white light, 3 little fine wires there, and we're going to mount that on the side of the wagon with the red facing at the back and the white facing to the front, just about here on the side. And if you can see that, something like that there, and we'll run those wires inside and connect that up. And while we're at it, might put a red light on the back as well, white lights on the inside. So yeah, it will look nice. And finally, the last thing that we're going to put on is these pickups here. These go over the axles of the wheels that we already prepared. It's like a spring that slides over the axle like so. We put the wheel back on, we solder to that, and now this will act as a pickup and pick up the current from the track, bring it into our flicker-free circuit, and use that to power the lights. So the first thing I want to do is just measure how this is going to fit when we're finished. I'd like to put 2 lights in because I think it will look good. So I'm going to lay it through on the top of that roof there, just between those pillars like so. So we should be able to get a couple of lights on there. So I think we'll cut it off there, which means we'll put a light in here and a light in there. Okay, so I've got 2 prototype white LEDs, and what we want to use is the long lead on the resistor side. I'll pop that in like so. The key is to make sure we do the same with the other one, and we'll pop that in to the next one. Give it a firm push like that. Now that's ready to solder up. Okay, so that's all soldered up now, and I've just snipped off the ends, and I like just to rub a file on the back there just to make that nice and smooth so it's easier to stick up in the roof. So I'm going to grab my white metal files and we'll file that off. Okay, that's nice and smooth on the back there now, and all we need to do is with our cutters trim this to the length, and I marked that with a pen earlier. Just snip through that, and now we can wire up the terminals on the end there, and that's our little board ready to stick into the roof of our wagon. So thinking about this a little bit further, what I decided to do was set up a small test board to work out whether or not the fixed resistor values would be appropriate for the different lights. And so I've rigged up this little strip board, and we'll just zoom in and have a look at this. All it is basically 3 different resistors that when powered up I can plug my little circuit board into, which has got my LEDs on, and see whether or not the lighting intensity's right or not. Similarly over here I've set up some terminals with some resistors for our lamp here, and we'll light that up and have a look. So what I've done is rigged up a power supply of 12 volts indicating some sort of track power of some description. That then I've got alligator clips as jumper leads going to the inputs of our stay alive or flicker free capacitor board here. Those then I have terminated into one of these really useful 2-pin plugs that are a 2mm pitch. I buy a bundle of these, of course, Chinese origin on eBay, and they come with a little bag of sockets, and they're $2 or $3 type of thing. Get a bundle of those. So I've soldered a few sockets onto the board here, soldered a plug on the end here, and we simply plug this in to the socket. Okay, so we've actually illuminated our lights. At the moment we've got our lights sitting on the 4700 ohm or 4K7 resistor here. We've got a 30,000 and a 20,000 as well, which I found to be probably a little bit too dim, to be honest. We've got 20k or 20,000 ohm resistors here for the red and white. What's important to note is that you need to have a separate resistor for the red and a separate resistor for the white. This is actually 2 LEDs in one package. If you try and do it off of the one, it's basically, it sees the red one go out and the white one stay alight. The way that the power shares on that, on the current shares on that. Let's just turn out the light and see if we can see a difference here. Okay, so zooming in, okay, it's quite clear what we've got here in terms of the LEDs for going in the roof. When I put the wagon over the top of that, it's difficult to see from the video, but that looks like a good level of lighting inside. If we look at our loco lamp here, what we've got is our white light, and that's a nice glow. If we turn that around and have a look at the other side, you can see the red light on the back of it, and that's not too bright. That will look fine. So just a little test board, and it helps us make sure that we're comfortable with our resistors before we wire it up. You could always put a variable resistor in too and play around with adjusting a trim pot, something like that too. Keep it simple. I'm just going to run with a fixed value resistor. Now our next step is to wire up our wheels and axles. So if you remember, we used some conductive paint just to make a connection between the axle and the wheel on one side. We've now put those wheels back together again, and we've used a gauge to set that the wheel distances, flange to flange, is correct. Nice and snug fit there. I'm doing a double O of 16.2mm on mine, so that's what this gauge is for, or a double O SF gauge, but you can set these to whatever you want. I've then soldered the pickup wire, which you can see here, to a piece of wire coming from the flicker free unit. Done the same on the other side. What we need to do now is put these axles back in, but we need to make sure that one of them comes from the left side and the other one comes from the right hand side, so we pick up our current to power up our capacitor here. Doesn't really matter which one you go with, but I stick with the convention of a black on the left and a red on the right, and consistently wire everything up that way. So whether I'm doing decoders or flicker-free units, that's the way I go. With the actual brake van now, we've got all 3 lamps now installed. We've got to run these wires now inside onto a circuit board that we'll connect this to, and then we'll be able to power it up, and then we'll see what it looks like. The next thing after that is to install our roof lights into the bottom of the roof there, and then plug that into the board that we'll stick on here. So let's get into it. Okay, out of interest, I just thought I'll turn off the power supply from the 12 volts to the flicker-free unit, which is sitting over here, and let's just see how long it holds a charge for and keeps these LEDs illuminated. So I'm going to unplug that now, and this will mean that there is no voltage coming to the flicker-free unit. You can see the flicker-free unit here has 2 bare ends of wires not connected to anything. It is still connected to the little test circuit board that I made, and it's just that capacitor now that's holding the charge and providing the current for these LEDs. So I'm going to put it on and let's see how it goes. Okay, so let's have a look underneath the wagon here. We've got our pickups, which are these springs that have been threaded onto the axles. We've got our conductive paint on the left hand side and the right hand side. We've got our wires soldered to our pickups and threaded up through these 2 holes. Turn that over, we've got our 2 wires now coming up through. I've got my left wheel being the black at the rear of this wagon and the red being the right wheel at the front. So we put this onto the track. I've got 12 volts connected up to that track, and we'll just test what we've got, make sure those pickups are working. With the multimeter, click on these leads. Okay, so yeah, 11.5 volts or so coming through on the multimeter. That's good. That shows the pickups are working, and even if we move that up and down, we're getting around about that 11.5 volts. So that means those pickups are working. Now we can go on with the rest of the install. At least we know that the pickups are working fine.